Hey guys, Scott here again with a new beer video for you. And notice I didn't say beer dissection or what is style beer, because today is just strict some basic knowledge when you're looking at your labels of beer when it pertains to the hops. Okay, there's some, I don't want to say kitschy advertising, but they kind of play a little bit on a few different words. And I want to make sure you guys are understanding the labels, because some things sound familiar to you, or they look, or I should say, they look similar to another term. And I want to make sure you guys are aware of this. So we're going to talk about hops, not the through Z of everything with hops, but just a few things about, dried hops versus dry hopping, wet hops and kind of fresh hops. So let's just talk about, hop, harvesting anyway. Usually the harvest season is around late August, September. Our big producers here in the United States is the Willamette Valley in Oregon, Yakima Valley in Washington, and some canyon region in western Idaho. Even though you will see it even here on Long Island, other areas in the United States that are good for growing hops. So when they're harvesting, the hop by itself, remember, looks a little bit, I always say it looks like a Brussels sprout, but instead of having like those round or oval leaves, they'll kind of have a little more prickly, trapezoidal or diamond kind of shaped leaf. Remember, we use hops for bittering to balance the malt sweetness. We use them for flavor. We use them for aroma, also as a preservative or antibacterial or microbial for beer, which is kind of a preservative. So when they harvest them, in most cases, okay, if they just take them right off the vine, whatever, and they throw them right in the beer, they will call that as a fresh hop or a wet hop, I should say. And fresh hop and wet hop really mean the same thing. Now, the wet hops, they'll just throw them right in the beer and produce the beer. I'm sure there's probably breweries like waiting for them, and they're usually got to be brewed within the first 24 hours or so. Again, it sounds great, it's fresh, whatever. However, one of the disadvantages to that is sometimes people describe the beer as having this grassy or vegetative type of flavor. But if you like that, fantastic. But again, fresh hopping technically and wet hops are along the same line, okay? Now, again, so depending if you see it on the label, and I'll probably have a few pop over my shoulder, fresh hopped or wet hopped, just understand they're pretty much coming off of the vine during harvest season, being used in a beer almost immediately, okay? And if not, if maybe the brewer uses some liberties, I don't think this is regulated, they may use them a day or two later, but it's usually fresh. But, you can get some nice fresh hops. So I don't want to make it sound like that vegetative or grassy note to it is always necessarily a bad thing, but that can happen in some of the beers. Now, let's get into more of the drying of the hops. Now, so again, they'll harvest the hops. Some hops will go immediately to the brewers. They usually get processed in some fashion. Sometimes they're just kind of ground down a little bit. They take out some of the vegetative stuff and they're made into plugs or sometimes pellets. Many times pellets, and again, I'll try to have them pop over my shoulder here. And home brewers and a lot of your microbreweries will use the pellet form. And they look like little thin, I'm trying to think of something in real life that looks like them, but these slow little compact, almost like when you see when you get your grass aerated and they're larger kind of plugs, they almost look like geese droppings, but they're kind of real small. Obviously they're green, very floral and things like that. And so they'll compress them into those pellets, sometimes in plug form, like I said, and then sometimes they're just lightly processed and packed up as kind of a whole hop. And again, the disadvantage for a brewer a lot of times with the whole hops is they got to usually use a lot more to kind of extract a lot of the bitterness and stuff from them. Again, I'm not going through the A through Z through hops and the lupulin glands and alpha acids and beta acids and everything like that in IBU units, even though the International Bitterness Units. So I just want you to make sure you understand the terms. So if you see them, so all hops in most cases, unless they're being used fresh or wet, are dried. Okay, they're just dried down a little bit, and they're lightly kilned to get some of the moisture out of them, not as kilned as, say, some malt is kilned in the brewing, like crystal malt and your Pale Row 2 malts and stuff like that, just to get some of the moisture out of it. So that's dried, D-R-I-E-D hops. Okay, we dried the hops, or they were dried. Okay, now dry hopping is a technique used in brewing and is usually done towards latter end of fermentation. Again, I think I have a picture of a carboy of a home brewer dry hopping. And towards the last 3 to 5 to 7 days of the brewing, they'll take the hops in the pellet form usually. It can be sanitized in a cone form, which are the catechins, again, off the hop plant. And they look like a cone or like a Brussels sprout with those things. They'll throw them into the beer. And now the advantages of that is it kind of gives the beer a little bit of a shot of having the aromatics of the beer. Okay, there may be some biotransformation, which again, I'm not going to go into that, about adding a little bit more bitterness and flavor and things like that. But that's called dry hopping, D-R-Y hopping. Okay, so if you see the hops were dried. Well, all hops get dried to a certain degree. If you see a label, I'm trying to think, I think Sierra Nevada's has a dry hopped ale. Celebration will say it's dry hopped. Okay, that means they took either the pellets, the plugs, whole catechins of the hop and threw them into the beer towards the tail end of the brewing process, okay? To add a more flavor and especially aroma to the beer. And you'll see that a lot of New England IPAs, hazy IPAs do that a lot, or American IPAs, dry hopping. So that's different than dried. And again, so if you see your can or bottle that says wet hopped, I think Sierra Nevada does one that's wet hopped, that beer was brewed probably pretty soon after those hops came off of the vine. You got to understand that means that the beer, if they're being honest, had to be brewed probably in the fall, right? In September, or late summer, early fall, September, end of September, to be really technically a wet hopped beer, okay? Or really fresh hops. Again, I think the term fresh has a lot more leeway than wet, but at least you understand that fresh hops and wet hops are really synonymous, but being wet, it's right off, it definitely should be coming off the vine right away. So again, I'm trying not to confuse this more for you guys, but when you're looking at these cans, and they do a lot of little marking kitschy stuff saying triple hopped and double hopped. And I think I did a video on that, all hops have hops in the beginning of the boil, midway through the boil, for flavor, to the last 15, 20 minutes for flavor, towards the end for aroma a lot of times, or even during the whirlpool, which is at the end of the boiling process, and they just throw hops in there. And then again, each hop addition will add a little bit more either aroma, flavor, bitterness, depending on where you put it in there. Okay, so again, when you see these labels and these cans, wet hopped, fresh hopped, dried hops, which a lot of times you don't see labels, but dry hopping is a brewing technique. So anyway, guys, I hope that helps you guys out. And until the next video, which may be a beer dissection video, I'll see you on the next side. But again, I like to do these videos, just some general beer knowledge, maybe help you next time you're looking at your can. You're like, what does all this dry hopping, wet hopping, or whatever mean? Okay? So anyway, have a great day, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.